For the past few months, I have been talking about the possibility of a house price crash in the UK alongside many other people on YouTube and in the mainstream media. However, the latest figures on the UK Land Registry is that as of September 2022, house prices are still up 9.5% year on year, and they've gone sideways for the past month. So what is going on? How can I be so confident that UK house prices are going to crash when the latest official stats, the best and most accurate stats you can get at the moment, are still showing house prices haven't fallen? That's what we're going to be looking at in this video. I'm going to talk you through a few different data sources, and also I have a piece of anecdotal evidence at the end, which is the strongest piece of evidence I've seen yet that this house price crash has started and that these figures are just lagging a bit. So the first thing you need to know is that these stats are from the Land Registry, and the Land Registry stats always lag. They are always the latest, the oldest stats when it comes to house prices. So at the moment, as I'm recording this video, it is the 21st of November. Yet these stats are from September 2022. So they're pretty much 2 months out of date. And that's one thing you need to keep in mind when you see any story related to house prices over the next few weeks and over the next few months, is they will be using different data sources. So the Land Registry are always the most accurate, but are always the most out of date. And then you have people like Halifax and Nationwide, who I'm going to show you in a moment, and they're a bit more up to date. And then you have the most recent ones, which will be Rightmove, but Rightmove are only based on asking prices and not sold house prices. So you shouldn't really read too much into those. So let's go through some of those stats. Then I'm going to get to that anecdotal piece of evidence that I talked about, and also a couple of other considerations that you guys need to keep in mind when you're thinking about which direction this housing market is headed. So up first, let's take a look at Halifax. So this is slightly more recent. This is for October 2022. And they are saying that the annual change in house prices is up 8.3%, but the monthly change is down 0.4%. So this is up, or should I say down, from 0.1% in September. So in September, basically Halifax were saying house prices almost went sideways, but now we're starting to see the first kind of notable drop. But really, things won't really kick off until we see maybe drops of 1% per month and above. That's when things you're going to really start seeing the news articles pop up in the mainstream media. So Halifax are already starting to show the falls kicking in despite still being up year on year by 8.3%. And Nationwide are reporting a similar story. So in September, they had their month-on-month prices pretty much sideways, just as the Land Registry data shows. But then the monthly change into October shows it down 0.9% and year-on-year 7.2%. So the more recent data sets from both Nationwide and Halifax are showing falls, whereas the data from Land Registry, which is 2 months old, is showing the housing market going sideways. But they all pretty much paint the same picture in September. We went sideways in September, and then these two are showing that we're starting to decline in October. And if we go to the most recent data source, but it's also one of the most unreliable, of course, as well, is the Rightmove House Price Index. And if we read this first paragraph here, the average price of property coming to the market drops by 1.1%. So the average asking price for new listings has dropped by 1.1% this month, which, despite the weight of financial uncertainty, is in line with the average 1.1% drop recorded in November during the pre-pandemic years of 2015 to 2019. So what we're seeing here is Rightmove trying to put a positive spin on what I would say is bad news for the housing market, because they're completely ignoring the years after the pandemic. So in 2021 and 2020, or at the end of 2020, when house prices were really starting to pick up, they're completely ignoring that and just saying, oh, when you compare it to pre-pandemic levels, this is comparable. But we want to be comparing it to what's happened over the past 2 years, because that is when we've seen the strongest acceleration. So I think Rightmove are just trying to make bad news not sound like bad news. But certainly the most recent data is showing that asking prices for new listings are dropping. The other thing to keep in mind with all of this as well is there are huge lags between what happens in the economy and how people react to that with regards to buying and selling houses, and how long that takes to report into the actual figures. So if I go back to this Rightmove House Price Index report from June, they actually covered conveyancing. And you can see here, conveyancing logjam means sellers need to come to the market in the next few weeks to be in with the best chance of moving before Christmas. Bear in mind this is from June, with the average time, this is the bit I want you guys to take away from this, the average time to get through conveyancing is currently 150 days. That is 5 months to go through the conveyancing process. So any figures really that we're seeing at the moment from September and October, that is from 4 or 5 months previous to this, when the markets were at their hottest. So it's going to take a good few months for us to really see the impacts of really the mini budget, because it was September that did the real damage. Things were already heading in the wrong direction due to inflation and the energy crisis, but it was the mini budget which really destroyed market sentiment and also double or tripled the cost of mortgage payments. So if we're looking at 150 days from September, we're talking February, March next year before we start to see these real strong figures trickle through to the land registry. I think probably January, February before we start to see it with Halifax and nationwide. And I think anytime now, as we're seeing with a 1.1% drop on Rightmove, we're going to start seeing these figures really pick up over the next month or two as we go into Christmas. And going on to this really strong piece of anecdotal evidence, let me take you over to Rightmove. So I'm going to take you to a particular area that I know very well. This is where I used to live before I sold my house. And if any of you guys have been following me for a while, I sold my house at the end of August, and I've currently moved into rented, and I'm hoping the housing market is going to crash. So I know there's going to be people watching this video that don't want the housing market to crash, so please don't think I'm wishing bad for you guys. It's just my own selfish preferences. I want to see a nice big house price crash. So Walderslade Woods, let's say it's about an hour from London. It's been getting more and more demand as the London spread continues. And I just want to show you detached properties. And the reason I want to show you this is the market that I used to follow all the time, as that was the type of property I had in the area. So that's why I go back to this. This is what I have the most knowledge of. I've been following this particular area for the best part of about 15 years. So when I see things happen, it means more to me because I understand the market a lot better. If I just did this search based on where I currently live, it wouldn't be as useful for me because I don't know the history of the houses around here, but I do for this particular area. And if we sort this by newest listed, so we've got 69 properties. I'm not going to go through all of them, but let's just see if we can get a general takeaway from what you see here. So go past the first featured listing as I paying to be the first organic listing. Look at this. Already had a couple of price reductions. Actually, let's put one more filter on. I want to filter, I don't want any of the buying schemes in there. And also I want to include the ones that are under offer and sold subject to contract. That's very important for the point I'm trying to make with this. So let's just go through these quickly. This is reduced. This is reduced, 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 reduced. Are you seeing a pattern here? Added, 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 reduced, added, reduced, added, reduced, added, added. There we go. The first sold STC. That was on the 4th of November. So that's about 2.5 weeks ago. Now I can tell you from knowing this particular area inside out, houses don't generally come on this market for much longer than 1 to 2 weeks. So the fact I had to get this far down to find the first sale subject to contract, which actually looks like it isn't a correct listing because properties in this area don't sell for £137,000, as you can see here. So something's not quite right with this listing. It wouldn't surprise me if this was some sort of fake listing just to get their stats up for that particular estate agent. That's just a pure guess. That's not saying Purple Bricks are doing this. Something else could have happened with this listing, but certainly something is wrong for this property to be listed at £137,000. Well, if we continue down a bit further, so this one looks a bit more legit. 450, that was sold on the 2nd of November. But I've scrolled down and this entire front page, only 2 of those properties, despite all those reductions, have gone sold subject to contract. And I have never seen so many reductions on house prices in this particular area. And I've never seen houses like this be on the market for so long. So for me, this is a massively strong piece of anecdotal evidence that we are heading into a house price crash. And I invite you guys to do this for your area, the area you know the best. Go and do this on Rightmove. Go onto the filters, tick that sold subject to contract box and under offer box and see when the last sale was and how many new listings and reductions have been since that haven't gone sold subject to contract. I think you might be surprised how things are looking in the housing market at the moment. There are also a couple other things that I want you guys to keep in mind. Number one is how long is a mortgage offer valid for? And the reason I bring this up is a good friend of mine is in the process of buying a house at the moment. He's buying a new build and his mortgage offer was valid for 6 months and that offer expires in December. And if that new build property isn't complete by December, he's not going to buy that house because he'll have to find a new mortgage and his interest rate is going to jump from 2% to well above 5%. So a lot of the sales that we're seeing being pushed through in September, October, even into November are mortgages that were agreed prior to the mini budget. So it's very important to understand that those sales the prices are going to be slightly inflated because the mortgages funding them were at a much lower rate. Whereas anything going forward, and again, I talk about this lag, until that lag period plays through. So basically, until 150 days or around that from the mini budget, that is we're going to see the true impact on these housing prices. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, one of the other huge things that has changed since my last videos on these topics is the mainstream media sentiment, the market sentiment, and even social media sentiment has completely turned as well. And you've even got articles covering the OBR report that they're expecting a drop of 9% over the next 2 years. So if the OBR are predicting drops, and that's going to be on the conservative side, of course, they're not going to create scaremongering. And the Bank of England, of course, predicting a 2-year recession. This complete change in narrative, that's complete change in market sentiment. This housing market is only heading one direction. And if we go back to the actual house price chart, if we look where we are now at this peak that is starting to flatten, you can see this flattening from August to September. This looks very similar to what happened here back during the global financial crisis when things starting to flatten. So the initial price drops might be quite small, but then things will really start to snowball. So I think by the time we get to Easter next year, you're going to see some chunky drops being reported in the mainstream media. So I hope you guys have found this video helpful. If you did, please scroll down and hit that like button. If you want to see more from me, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to know how far I think house prices are going to drop, I'm going to pop up a video in front of me now, and I'll see you guys over there.